I work on truth commissions, and particularly I'm interested in the impact of truth commissions, and particularly in the longer term impact of truth commissions. And I came across the topic of archives because I discovered that archives are one of the most important legacy of a truth commission, and that can be used and can be helpful to advance other transitional justice mechanisms, including reparations, prosecutions, and now memorialization initiatives as well. So I mainly focus on the impact of truth commissions and indirectly on the archives within the impact of truth commissions, which are an integral part of the truth commission work. I conducted a long-term impact assessment of the Chilean truth commissions, and I realized that not immediately, but through the years and later on, its archives were, for example, used for in prosecutions, internationally and domestically. The Pinochet case abroad was built also on the Rettig report, which is the name of the report issued by the Chilean Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And its archives, which are accessible to domestic lawyers and judges, are obviously used to build cases in domestic prosecutions. The archives were incredibly important to provide reparations individually to all victims who had been qualified as victims of enforced disappearances or political executions, or as well as the same things that happened for the second Truth Commission in Chile, which was established in 2003-2004. So again, they've been a source for the reparations that were implemented immediately after. The archives contain information on the mainly on the structures of how the dictatorship worked, how the structure of power worked, which are incredibly important to contextualize the evidence showing that the crimes were massive and systematic crimes, were part of a policy of state, a policy of extermination, were not just isolated cases, which is one of the greatest contributions the archives gave, for example, to the contextual elements of the trials. And in terms of memorialization, I think they have to play an important role because thanks to the archives, sometimes we are able to locate the center that were used as torture center, for example, during the dictatorships, or we know the methods that were used in the center, what happened there, what happened to these people. Again, Chile is a good example where these places have been rescued by the state, and I believe that the archives can immensely help in terms of building the memorials and helping the memorials to become something more which belongs more to the society rather than a static monument, which is what's happening in all the memory and memorialization process. Unfortunately, the archives of both Chilean commissions are not open to the public. So they're not accessible to the public. They're only open to the first archives of the Rettig Commission, which is the first truth commissions established in 1990, are accessible to courts and to lawyers and to judges that needed it in the prosecution. So they were opened and information has been sent, and it's been currently used in this sense, while the second Truth Commissions, the Valage Commission, established in 2003 and finished its work in 2004, it's not. They're completely secret, the archives of that Truth Commission. So the reports are public, but the records and the archives are closed to the public. So I didn't really have the chance to access the archives. I only talked to those who have used the archives in this sense. So, for example, some judges in Chile, or some other initiatives, as for example, that have used the report of the Second Truth Commissions to produce a land registry to signpost all the torture centers, more than hundreds of torture centers that were actually established all over the country. So unfortunately, unfortunately they're not open, and there's at the moment a huge campaign from an organization called Londres 38, and many others, which is a coalition of civil society. It's an organization, but there's also a coalition of civil society organizations that is it's struggling to open the archive. So there's a huge campaign in Chile at the moment fighting for the opening of the archives. there's been a reopening of the second Truth Commissions later on as well. So there's also another registry, like a last one. Well, let's say that the main reason why the archives are not open is to protect confidentiality. And so it's a data protection reason, both for the victims protection. That's the main reason why they've not been open since the beginning. Now this is contested. This is what President Lagos at the time declared publicly, that it was basically was a duty of the state to protect the victims' testimonies, because arguably some of these victims had never declared before to anybody what had happened to them. And probably, but there was not established since the beginning what was going to happen of the archives of the Truth Commissions, of the Second Truth Commission. So probably this is the main reason why we have this complex situation today. There are, of course, there's a huge campaign for the opening. There is a possibility that this is going to happen. I don't see it likely to happen in the at the moment. It might be in the next few years, after continuing pressure and campaigning of the organizations over the government, and increasing pressure of the international community, because we are today in an era of opening the archives, and the point of having a Truth Commission with secret archive, it's a little bit at least inconsistent. The idea of having a Truth Commission and of opening what happened about the past, and engaging the society as much as possible with secret archives. It can be done. Obviously, we need to preserve the confidentiality of the victims, but I do believe that we have the mechanism in place to preserve the confidentiality of the victims, as well as to publish the systematic practice and policy of the politics of extermination and of massive and systematic crimes that were committed, without necessarily violating the confidentiality of the victim. It's just a matter at the moment of political will. I mean, the law has to be changed, needs to be changed. So it is a matter of political will and of political negotiations. I don't think that, I don't see it happening anytime soon. But I think that the human rights movement in Chile has been persistently demanding, and has obtained quite a lot throughout the years, quite unexpectedly, in terms of initial context very closed, and then opening up a little bit by the time. It's been a process. It's a long process, and it's a continuous negotiation with the state and with state parties that are in charge of these issues. Well, academia has a lot to offer in terms of rethinking about the role of human rights archives or transitional justice archives. I don't know how first of all, definitional problems, like what are human rights archives? What makes it different from a national archive, from what traditionally the world has until now defined what an archive is, as well as what is a transitional justice archive, because they're not necessarily the same thing. A transitional justice archive, it's a state-led institution in a certain way, because it's an official body legitimated and created by the state. So in a way, the archives of a Truth Commission, of international courts, of national courts, are archives that do still belong to the state, and in fact, to be opened, there has to be a negotiation with the state. Archives of human rights are private archives. Archives of human rights organizations are more private archives. So it's a very different type of we face different type of archives, and we just have to decide what do we want to do with these types of archives. Where do we want to where it's the whole process of opening leading to. The academia can certainly connect the dots in terms of opening the archives to respect and protect the right to truth of the victims and of the society as well. Academia can help certainly the debate of the problematic aspects of the archives, including the politics of archives, the ownership of the archives, the creation of the archives, and how do they contribute to the public and political negotiation of the past. And so they are a place where really like the past can be debated, renegotiated, and where different truths come out of the different types of archives that are produced, which means that they are powerful democratic space where the society, the human rights groups, the victims organizations, and the state can engage, and the perpetrators as well, if they're willing to, can engage into a conversation in order to re-establish, rewrite the national narrative.